Okay, we've got, so us 12, I'm going to take a risk and see if we can tackle the Independent Māori Statutory Board Funding Agreement before we go to lunch. Could I bring those responsible for this to the fore? Okay, off you go.
Tēnā koutou. Thank you, Mayor. This report seeks governing body approval for a proposed funding agreement with the Independent Māori Statutory Board for the 2023 financial year. Auckland Council is required to fund the reasonable costs of the Independent Māori Statutory Board's operations and to make an annual funding agreement for these costs. The proposal this year is very similar, with a small reduction in total value compared to previous years at about just over $3 million. This funding agreement covers the operational funding for board member remuneration, secretariat staff remuneration, seeking external advice to the board, their communications and other expenses, including audit. For the coming financial year, the major changes are a reduction in their budget for seeking external advice, which reflects increased capability within the Secretariat, and an increase in communication costs, which reflects some outsourcing of that work, which was previously delivered internally. So the recommendation is for the governing body to approve the funding agreement for the coming year and to approve a delegation to the Chief Executive to approve of a variation of up to $50,000. This variation is to provide some flexibility should it be necessary, and mean that if there's a small variance that doesn't need to come back before this body for further decision making. I'll leave it there and ask for any questions.
Councillor Turner.
Yeah, it all seemed very reasonable, but I just wondered, do we pay for their offices? That's a rental space, is it?
Thank you. Through the chair, yes, we do. That is funded through as a direct payment that council makes to the property landlord.
Oh, so that's separate to this?
It's separate to this.
I'll come offline and talk to people. Okay, thank you.
Very good question. I didn't spot that. So that's paid separately outside this, because that's the palace that they're in, which is in comparison. What further pressure? Because we're trying to consolidate people back in here, aren't we? Yeah. Oh, we have a bit more say on that. I thought they'd made the decision themselves to do that. Okay, there's a bit of work for you. Tumu Whakare. Councillor Walker.
In the report, it mentions a review of the remuneration. I've since received that, but I do note that the review of the remuneration doesn't make any mention of attendance at meetings or the like. It does set the rate at 70% of a councillor's base rate. So has there been any assessment of the board in that respect, or is that not our role?
No, it's not our role. The independent assessment of remuneration expressly doesn't look into the performance of board members. It just looks at what the remuneration should be. And we're obliged by legislation to get an independent assessment of what that remuneration should be. We're also obliged by legislation to follow that advice.
The question I've got is, it mentions in the figures, amongst other things, I noted the communications went up by about 80,000, but you've got an explanation for that, James, because I've already asked you that offline, but you might as well give it now.
Thank you. Through the chair, yes, so that is the increase in remuneration reflects outsourcing of that communication work, which was previously delivered internally.
Thank you. Councillor Watson, please.
Just a very a quick question in respect of board remuneration and expenses. In the past, the IMSB have had 9 members, as far as I can see, going back to start of the super study. There only seems to be 6 now. Is there a reason for that? And if so, is the remuneration affected by a decline in numbers?
I see Phil Wilson making his way to the table, so I might defer to my elders.
Well, while he's making his way there, it's all of our other funding agreements with CCOs and everything is a gross thing, and they decide to pay their rent. So why aren't we doing the same thing here? The AT pay their rent, and we're at pains at the moment. We're putting pressure on them to get out of where they are and come into here, something cheaper. And so I'm blown if I can see where the treaty says we have to have palaces for some section. So I'm asking you to have a look into that, please. The arrival of...
Thanks, Your Worship. So the numbers on the Independent Māori Statutory Board are a function of the statute. The difference between the 6 and the 9 is that there are some unresolved disputes within 2 iwi groupings as to their representation. That matters with the Minister currently for resolution. We will be advised in due course that those positions have been filled once the Minister's resolved the arguments around it.
Okay, so I guess the simple question that follows from that is then, is this a backdated pay settlement here, a la PPTA, or is that a saving to council and salaries?
That'll be a saving to council in that there won't be those positions filled until that time.
Saving to council or saving to the IMSB?
To council, to the funds that the IMSB draws down, yes, but ultimately any underspend in the IMSBs flows through to council. And I might add, just for councillors' information, the IMSB, in my estimation, has taken a pretty disciplined approach to its expenditure and has consistently come in under budget year on year. I can't recall a situation where that wasn't true. So I expect it to be the case this year also.
Well, that's very good news. Move over Gudsell, the IMSB are coming. No, that was a joke actually. Just in case. We've got some young people at the back, they might not have taken it seriously. Do I have someone to move the recommendation? I do. I have Councillor Newman, to be seconded by Councillor Leone, I imagine. And thank you very much for that. I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, carried. And lunch break will take place now for half an hour, or a review. We'll be back here at 1:05. Thank you very much for your attendance so far.